Before I start this video, I want to beg you, please don't judge me. This is a story I'm honestly not proud of, but it happened, and I think it's time I share it. Sometimes our feelings get confused, and what you think is real, well, it isn't always what you imagined. It all started when my mom had to leave the house for a few days. She was visiting my aunt who had just given birth, so she needed to be there to help with the baby and all. I was left at home with my dad, and honestly, I didn't think much of it at first. I'd always been close to my dad, and being a daddy's girl was something I never minded. But this time, things felt different. I was older now, and with my mom gone, it just felt like there was more time for us to talk, to be together. And somehow, the time we spent together started to feel strange. The first time I noticed something was off. We were sitting on the couch, watching TV like we always did. It was some comedy show we both liked, and normally we'd just laugh together like it was nothing. But that day, something felt different. When my dad laughed and his hand brushed mine, I felt this weird jolt, like electricity. At first I ignored it, telling myself I was just imagining things. But it wasn't just that one moment. As the evening went on, I kept noticing him. The way he moved, the sound of his laugh, even the way his shirt fit on his body. I felt drawn to him in a way that I couldn't explain, and I knew deep down that something was changing. I tried to brush it off as just a phase, or maybe just being lonely without Mom around. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every little thing about my dad started standing out to me. His scent, the way his hair fell over his forehead, the warmth of his smile, it all started to seem different. I'd never thought of him this way before, but now I was noticing things I'd never paid attention to. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to feel this way. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push it away. At night, when I went to bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about him. My thoughts were jumbled, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. How could I be feeling this way about my own father? I hated myself for it, but at the same time, I couldn't deny it. There was something there, something that made me feel alive and confused all at once. And the worst part was, I didn't know how to stop it. The days passed, and I noticed myself paying more attention to him than I should. Every time he walked into a room, my eyes would automatically follow him. When we ate dinner together, I found myself avoiding eye contact, too embarrassed by the thoughts swirling in my head. I kept thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling like this? But the more I tried to make it go away, the stronger it became. It wasn't like I wanted to feel this way. I knew it was wrong, but at the same time, I couldn't help it. One day, things got even worse. My dad had spent most of the afternoon working in the yard, mowing the lawn and trimming the bushes. When he came back inside, he was covered in sweat, and his shirt clung to his chest. I don't know why, but something about that moment made everything more intense. I felt a rush of heat, and I had to leave the room because I couldn't handle being near him. My heart was racing, and all I could think about was how close we were. I felt embarrassed, ashamed, and scared, but at the same time, I couldn't deny that the attraction was real. At least it felt real at that moment. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't talk to anyone about it because, well, who could I possibly tell? It wasn't something I could just bring up in a casual conversation, and I couldn't tell my dad. What was I supposed to say? Hey, Dad, I think I'm attracted to you? It was impossible, so I kept everything bottled up inside. But the more I kept it to myself, the more it grew. It was like a fire inside me that I couldn't put out, no matter how hard I tried. Every time I was around him, it felt like the air in the room got heavier, like something was pulling us closer together. Late one evening, after dinner, I went up to my room early, trying to get some space to think. I figured maybe if I stayed away from him for a while, these feelings would fade, but even as I lay in bed, trying to focus on something else, I couldn't stop thinking about him. My mind kept replaying the way he'd looked at me earlier, how his hand had brushed against mine when he passed me the plate at dinner. It was a small thing, but it had felt huge at the moment, like it meant more than it should have. I lay there for what felt like hours, tossing and turning, trying to make sense of it all. Why was this happening? Why now? I had never felt this way before. My dad had always just been, well, my dad. But now, every little thing he did felt charged with a new energy, and I didn't know how to handle it. I felt guilty for even thinking these thoughts, but they wouldn't stop. They kept coming back, and each time they felt stronger. The next morning, I decided to avoid him as much as possible. I figured if I stayed busy, I wouldn't have time to think about it. So, I spent the day in my room, cleaning, organizing, anything to keep my mind off him. But it was impossible. Even the smallest sound of him moving around the house made me tense up. When I heard him coming up the stairs, I felt my heartbeat quicken, and I didn't know why. It was like my body had a mind of its own, reacting to him in ways I didn't understand. At one point, he knocked on my door, asking if I wanted to have lunch with him. I could hear the kindness in his voice, but all I could feel was panic. I didn't want to be near him, not when I was feeling like this. But I couldn't avoid him forever. So I forced myself to open the door and go downstairs. He had made sandwiches, and as we sat down at the table, I tried to focus on anything but him. I kept my eyes on my plate, barely saying a word, hoping he wouldn't notice how uncomfortable I was. But of course, he did. My dad has always been good at reading me. He could tell when something was bothering me, even when I tried to hide it, and this time was no different. After a few minutes of silence, he asked, "Is everything okay? You've been acting a little off." His voice was full of concern, and that only made me feel worse. How could I explain to him what was really going on? There was no way he could ever understand. I shrugged, trying to play it off. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." He looked at me for a moment, like he didn't quite believe me, but thankfully he didn't push. He just nodded and went back to eating. But the guilt gnawed at me. Here was my dad, just trying to be kind, and I was sitting there, hiding these awful feelings. I felt sick to my stomach, but there was nothing I could do about it. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I stayed in my room, avoiding him as much as I could, but it didn't make the feelings go away. If anything, the distance made it worse. Every time I thought I had a handle on things, a memory would pop into my head. A moment when he'd smiled at me, or a time when we'd laughed together, and it would all come rushing back. I kept thinking, this isn't right. I shouldn't be feeling this way. What's wrong with me? But no matter how hard I tried to push the thoughts away, they kept coming back. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling again, my mind racing. I felt trapped, like I was stuck in this awful situation with no way out. And then, around midnight, I heard a soft knock on my door. My heart skipped a beat. It was my dad. I didn't know why he was there, and for a second I panicked. What if he somehow knew what I was feeling? What if he could tell that I wasn't acting normal around him? He opened the door a crack and peered in, his face soft and full of concern. "Hey, I just wanted to check on you. You've seemed a little distant lately. Everything all right?" His voice was gentle, and it made me feel even more conflicted. Here he was, just being the caring dad he always was, and I was sitting there, struggling with these inappropriate feelings. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, trying to keep it together. But he didn't leave. Instead, he stepped into the room and sat on the edge of my bed. I could feel the weight of him beside me, and my heart started racing again. I wanted to tell him to leave, to give me some space, but I couldn't. Part of me didn't want him to go, and that was the scariest part of all. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine, and I could see the worry on his face. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know what. After a few moments of silence, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You know you can talk to me, right? About anything?" His touch was soft, fatherly, but it sent a wave of confusion through me. I wanted to lean into it, but at the same time, I wanted to pull away. My mind was a mess, and I didn't know what to do. I nodded again, not trusting myself to speak. He gave me a small smile, then leaned in and kissed my forehead, just like he used to when I was a kid. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The feelings I'd been struggling with for days, the confusion, the attraction, it all started to melt away. That simple gesture reminded me of who he really was. My dad, the man who had raised me, who had always been there for me. And suddenly, I realized how wrong I'd been. That kiss on the forehead felt like a reset button. It snapped me out of the fog I'd been in. I realized that everything I'd been feeling was a mix of confusion, loneliness, and maybe even boredom without my mom around. My mind had twisted those emotions into something they weren't, and I was ashamed that I had let it get so far. My dad stayed for a few more minutes, talking about random things, probably to help me relax. And it worked. The more we talked, the more I realized how ridiculous my thoughts had been. This was my dad, the man who had always cared for me. What I'd felt was temporary, just a weird phase, and now I could see that clearly. As soon as he left the room, I took a deep breath, feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The attraction, the confusion, it was gone. I felt normal again. It was like I had been caught in a storm, and now the skies were clear. I knew I had overcome it, and I'd never let myself fall into that trap again. So, to anyone watching this, if you've ever felt something that didn't make sense, something you knew was wrong, remember, feelings don't define you. They can be confusing, but they're temporary. You're stronger than your worst thoughts, and you can always choose to move past them.